there, Telebait here, and Shurima is almost upon us. And I've been theory crafting a few decks, and I've got 3 decks that I'm going to be trying out at the start of this expansion, and I wanted to share these with you today. So first up, I've got a list which is something a lot of people have theorized about, which is Kindred Undying. And basically, Kindred, one of the new champions coming in this patch, every time you slay a unit, which is something killed by a card or a unit of yours, and most importantly for this archetype, slaying counts on your own unit. So when you kill one of your own units, I mark the weakest enemy, and then at the end of the round, units with the mark die. And Kindred has a really, really good stat line as well. It's so important having 4 health on key units like this, just because dealing 4 damage is something a lot of decks struggle with. And additionally, having the quick attack allows Kindred to attack in quite often without the risk of dying, which can just get you a little extra chip damage, which is always nice. So the best synergy I and many others have theorized is with a deck like the Undying, where you kill the Undying repeatedly, which buffs it up. And then if you have Kindred on the board when you're doing this, every time you kill the Undying, you're also killing one of your opponent's units. So you're buffing up one of your units, killing one of your opponent's units a turn, and it's just such a big threat because you're going to build up such a big board advantage over your opponent. And that's kind of just how the deck's supposed to work. You just build up this massive board advantage over your opponent and then attack in, and then use cards like Citrus Courier to rally, and you can attack in again and finish them off. And Citrus Courier is the main reason I've gone for a Bilgewater Splash as the second region. I think some people might go different ways with this deck, maybe trying out some of the Shurima Slay cards, but I find that none of them really fit that well into this archetype. I think you could go for a different sort of Shurima Slay archetype, but if you're going for an Undying Kindred deck, I still think Bilgewater will be the best combination with the Undying deck. And also I've gone for what I call the Callista aggro game plan with this deck. So you use things like turn 1, you play Bark Beast, turn 2, you play Curse Keeper, and then you play Ravenous Butcher onto the Curse Keeper, which gives you Bark Beast as a 3/3, Curse Keeper gives you the Escape Abomination, a 4/3, and Ravenous Butcher, a 3/2, all on turn 2. And it's just a really big, nasty board to deal with early. And you don't get every game, but some games you'll just get this big aggro start to begin with, and you can just blow out your opponents. And if you don't get that, you can still rely on the Undying game plan, build up a big Undying, and use Citrus Courier to finish off your opponent. And one important tech that I've included into this card is Crumble, as I think there'll be a lot of landmark-reliant decks coming in on this patch. I think Crumble is a very key removal card to have in a deck. So if you're going to try and build your own Undying deck, I highly recommend you include 2, maybe even 3 if the meta calls for it, Crumbles in your deck. So I feel this deck has quite a lot of diversity in how it can win, and that always makes a deck very strong, and it's one of the ones I'm definitely very excited for, and I expect to see a lot of different versions of a Kindred Undying deck on patch day 1. Next up is the deck that I am most hyped for at the moment, which is a Lissandra Taliyah deck, all based around one of the new cards called Frozen Thrall. And this card is insane. Well, it's not insane, but it's potentially insane. So, countdown 8, summon a Frostguard Thrall. A Frostguard Thrall is an 8/8 with the Overwhelm. And Frozen Thrall working normally would get this out on turn 9, but what makes this really strong is you can use Draklorn Inquisitor to get this out on turn 6 or turn 7. And that can be really, really strong, especially when you're only paying 1 mana for it at the start. But that's not it. The whole game plan with this deck is you get an early Frozen Thrall out, then you use Promising Future on it. This means instead of summoning 1 Frostguard Thrall, it will now summon 2 Frostguard Thralls. And not only that, if you use Taliyah onto that landmark, you now have 2 of the landmarks, so in total you'll be getting 4 Frostguard Thralls. Then you play Draklorn Inquisitor, that comes down, you get 4 8/8s with Overwhelm, and I just feel it's going to be so difficult for anyone to come back from that position. And with this deck, you might be thinking, well, that's really reliant on getting Frozen Thrall turn 1, and you'd be right, which is why I've also got Stoneweaving. So if you don't get Frozen Thrall turn 1, you could play Stoneweaving on turn 2, and because you only have 1 mana, which you can use to spend on landmarks, I believe it's 100% chance that Frozen Thrall would be one of your options, and therefore we effectively have 6 cards which are Frozen Thrall, although this means it will come out on turn 2. And if you don't happen to draw any of them as well, we've also got Lissandra, which can get out turn 3. And again, this will be a little later than you would like, but because Draklon Inquisitor is going to be getting out early anyway, it doesn't really matter too much if it's 1 or 2 turns late. And even if your opponent manages to survive the big barrage of 8/8s with this deck, it's also got the alternative win condition. So you'll see I've got these Revitalizing Roars in this deck. And there's not really a good target in the deck. That's because we're going to be getting them from leveled up Lissandra. So we level up Lissandra by summoning the Frozen Thralls. And then once you've got at least 2 Frozen Thralls out, Lissandra will level and give you the Watcher in hand. And then you can use Revitalizing Roar on the Watcher to play the Watcher for 0 mana. You don't even need to meet the Watcher's condition of summoning 4 8-cost units. You can cheat it out using Revitalizing Roar, and then you can obliterate your opponent's deck, and that gives you an alternative win condition. It's not the main win condition of this deck, and I think a lot of people out there will create decks much more focused on this win condition, and you'll probably combine Lissandra with Trundle, because the pillar can help you level up Lissandra really fast. But I like to include the Revitalizing Roars here, just so you can use the Watcher as that alternative win condition if you need it. And because this is a deck mostly built around a sudden surge in tempo towards the later turns, I've also got a lot of cards which have a similar sort of game plan. Hibernating Rockbear is the similar sort of thing. You pay a little bit of mana early on, then you get that advantage in tempo later on. Avaros and Trapper, exact same thing, 3 mana 3/3, but then you get a 1 mana 5/5 later on. And then I've got a combo which I'm really excited to try out, which is Rockhopper, which summons the Rolling Sands. And then you can use Desert Naturalist onto the Rolling Sands to summon a Rock Bear, which is a 5/4, and you get a massive tempo swing from that as well. And Rockhopper also doubles up because this deck doesn't have much removal. If you know your opponent's going to play down a key unit, you can play down the Rockhopper. That stops them playing down the unit, or at least risk it getting vulnerable, and then you can use that to help remove that unit, just because this deck does lack removal at the moment. In general, I expect this deck to be really strong, like some version of this deck to be really strong, and you might have to cut out some of these 2 and 3 drops and put in things like Avalanche instead, and you just go for the stall game plan. But I'm going for more of a tempo game plan, much more board control here. This is how I expect the deck to be stronger, but I could be wrong. I definitely think the Frozen Thrall package will be a strong finisher though, and I expect to see some top tier decks using it. Okay, so a bit of a jump here for the third deck. It's a different day, as you can see by my sudden change in top, and Azir has just been released, and I knew I wanted to build a deck around Azir because he was the champion I mained in League. So here I am, I've come up with 2 decks to try out for Azir, and I cannot decide which one I prefer. Let me know in the comments below which version you'd like me to try out first. So first up is a Shurima Allegiance deck, and this is all built around Azir, who summons a Sand Soldier whenever an ally attacks, which is a really strong effect, especially when you combine it with all the other Sand Soldier effects. So we have Desert's Wrath here, which gives all Sand Soldiers +1/+0. And we have Emperor's Dice, which I believe that's how you say it, which also gives you a Sand Soldier whenever you attack. So every time you just attack him with 1 unit and you'll get this massive board of Sand Soldiers coming in. And that's kind of how you win. You force your opponent to constantly take bad trades into that. And if you buff up your Sand Soldiers, you can get a lot of damage through that way. But this version is mostly focused around using the Buried Sun Disc. And I've only got 1 copy, because it's Shurima Allegiance, which means I am guaranteed to draw this at the start of the game. The one bad thing is this card is very vulnerable to removal, but I don't really like running it outside of Shurima Allegiance, just because if you draw it later on, it's almost impossible to trigger. If you level up Azir, you're still going to have to wait 15 turns for it to activate, so you really need to level up both your Ascended Champion for it to activate. So it's quite a hard effect to get off, to be honest. Which is why it's not the main win condition, but it's an alternative win condition. And basically, if you manage to get this off, you just instantly win the game. But this does serve another effect, because you're guaranteed to draw it turn 1. It gives you the bonus effect from Shapestone, guaranteed at the start of every game. And also because you're guaranteed to draw it, I've only got 1 1-drop, which is the Doomkeeper, who's a very, very solid unit for this archetype. For the rest of the deck, I've got some removal in the form of Exhaust and Ruthless Predator. This is just using some vulnerable effects, so you can use this to get some decent trades with some of your Sand Soldiers. And those cards also synergize really well with Renekton, who's the Ether champion I've gone for this deck. I could have gone for one copy of Nasus as well because of the Sun Disc, but I just really don't think you'll ever flip the Sun Disc, so I don't think it's worth going for that. Renekton is the stronger champion fitting in with this archetype in my opinion. And because this is quite an early game, aggressive style of deck, you can use him as a potential finisher, which is why we've also got Ruin Runner, another great card from Shurima and could be used as a potential finisher. I also have my favourite combo, which is the Rock Copper Desert Naturalist combo. I think this is really, really strong, these two cards combined together. Like, you play this on turn 2, stops your opponent playing any big threats on turn 3. If they do play a threat, it gets vulnerable, you can possibly trade into it. If they decide not to play any units, you can come down with this on turn 4 and get a Grumpy Rock Bear, which is just insane. And it fits in with this general game plan of trying to put a lot of damage out, a lot of units out early, and attack in with them. Because it's Shurima Allegiance, I've also gone for 2 copies of the Golden Ambassador, draw a champion and grant it +2/+2. This deck is fairly reliant on Azir, so you will want to be seeing Azir from this if you haven't managed to draw it in hand. If you get Renekton instead, you're kind of happy with a 6/6 Renekton as well, because he levels up in only 2 strikes. So either way, it's a decent outcome. And finally, I've also just included Rite of Negation, and this is just like an alternative version of Deny, but it's insane, because it just stops all your opponent's plays. And because we're running so many ephemeral units, you can attack in, your opponent will come down with a bunch of fast responses trying to stop your open attack, Rite of Negation, and stops all that, all your units live. They might have decided not to block because they're all ephemeral, couple shaped stones down, and suddenly you win. I really, really think this card is really strong in this archetype. It's a strong card in general, but because it's limited to an archetype, that's what keeps it balanced. But if you're playing an archetype where you're happy to kill one of your allies, then you should be 100% playing this card. For my other version, which is a very similar deck, but it's combining with Ionia. And the main reason I've gone to combine with Ionia is because of one card called Field Musicians. Each round, once you've summoned 3 other allies, refill your spell mana and draw 1. This is insane. Because he's got a tune, he gives you 1 mana back. If you proc this once, you get 3 mana back, so he's basically free if you manage to proc his effect once. And then he gives you a draw every turn. He's got 4 health, so he's very difficult to remove with. The only thing which can easily remove him is Culling Strike, but then you've got cards like Shaped Stone to protect him. So I just really think Field Magicians is a really solid engine card and can allow you to keep drawing, especially if you combine him with Azir and Emperor's Dice. You can attack in, and that's 2 summons that turn, so you just need to play 1 unit. You can still play on curve, and if you have Emperor's Dice and Azir on the board, you're getting your free summons every time you attack. And to top off with this, I only has 2 other cards which synergize really well with this style, which is Sparring Student. When you summon an ally, give me +1/+1. Again, this is just going to be buffed up to insane amounts with Sand Soldiers. And Green Glade Duo, Elusive, give me +1 every time you summon an ally. Again, just going to be buffed up to insane amounts. I've also included Rock Copper, and I'm not sure if Rolling Sands counts as an ally. It says when I'm summoned, summon. So it might count as an ally. So it might count as 2 procs for Sparring Student, Green Glade Duo, and Azir's level up. But I'll have to see. But I've got this because I've got my favourite combo again, Rock Copper with Desert's Naturalist. I really think this will be strong just because I expect to see various landmark decks, and this counters that quite well. And even if you're not against the landmark deck, you can use the combo synergizing them together to get that Grumpy Rock Bear out. For the rest of the deck, I've gone for very similar cards as before. I've actually not gone for another champion though, because we're not going for the Ascended game plan. And instead, I've gone for a Sandcrafter, which is just another way to get more Sand Soldiers out and proc Field Musicians more often. Now back to past me from 2 days ago. So that's all the decks I've got for you today. Once the patch drops, I'll be optimizing these decks much more and releasing videos on them, so subscribe so you don't miss any of them. Until next time, thanks for watching, have a good day.